Well, not one or two.
One or two hits, actually.
But the excuse comes out was we were too high up and conditions were bad. These smart bombs still don't know how to get through the cloud.
The excuses have been very, very professional, if you ask me. Very imaginative, actually. I'll tell you what we're also going to be keeping our ear out for as well, and that is the harrowing story of what's going on underneath the ocean, that Russian submarine. Obviously, time is running out for something there, and something either must be done or else we'll have a very sad story.
I can't imagine. I'm claustrophobic anyway at the best of times. Yeah. But can you imagine the skipper down there trying to keep morale high when you're at the bottom of it? And you, by the way, I think I was listening this morning. It must be, I don't know, with the pressure down there, would it not be boiling hot in that sub? And what happens if a couple panic? Oh dear.
I don't remember anything like this that you need to keep people informed about. Since I was a boy and we used to have mining disasters, which thankfully now are a thing of the past, and you knew that there might be 100 men down there, and it was a question of whether they could find them in time. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that, as well as everything else.
Okay, Tommy. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to listen in. Before Tommy, it's your news and sport update. It's now 9:59.
On 10:89 and 10:53 a.m. Tommy Boyd on TalkSport.
Morning. Interesting one this morning. Question for you. Do you want to know everything? Do you want to know everything? Everything there is to know. Do you want to know everything? Or do you, like me, trust certain people to keep certain things from you for the very best of reasons? 08700 40 50 60 is the number. Do you want to know everything? Update on our understandable, entirely human concern for the Russian nuclear submarine. We will be speaking to a nuclear submarine commander a little bit later on this show. You want to know as much as you can. It's very difficult when they say on television and on the radio, for those of a nervous disposition, please look away now. Have you ever looked away? No, you haven't. You should do. And you probably wished you had under certain circumstances afterwards. I can think of turning the page in some history books and seeing documentary evidence of wartime atrocities that I wish I didn't have in my mind. Can I get rid of them? No. Do I wish I didn't know it? Yes. Yes, I do. And whoever put those books together ought to have thought about that. Gee, I was 16. I was doing an A-level. Okay, do you want to know everything? What I'm talking about, of course, I suppose in this case, is largely confined to what journalists and politicians choose for you to know. Do you want to know absolutely everything about the performance, if that's the right word, of the Allies during the Kosovo conflict? 08700 40 50 60. Do you need to know everything? Do you need to know who is living in your street, who's living in your neighborhood? You want to know. Do you need to know? Because then once you find out that there are people about whom you have some concerns who are living in your neighborhood, then comes the $64,000 question. What do you do? So maybe you're better off not knowing. 08700 40 50 60. Then there's the case of the farmer, Tony Martin. Okay. Max Clifford is now apparently steering the ship of his attempt to be released from prison, the ship of the attempt to have his trial reheard, his appeal. His solicitor has been binned. He's been sacked. His barrister has moved away from the case. And as much as anything else, the issue there appears to be just how much the public ought to know about the legal process. Do you need to know everything? I say you don't need to know everything. I'm saying you don't want to know everything. Why? Because you're not trained. You're not trained in law. You're not trained in military affairs. You're not trained in psychology, in criminal psychology. So the information that might be put before you would be of no use to you because you don't know what to do with it. Do we not, to a certain extent, elect politicians because we want them to deal with things that we not only don't have time to deal with, but we can't deal with? We're not able to deal with the minutiae, are we, of the Maastricht Agreement. Never mind about the interminable moral dilemmas in connection with when to release or whether to release at all convicted sex offenders. That's why we elect people to do that job for us. We cannot expect to find out all the information about all the debates in that issue. You don't need to know everything. You don't want to know everything. You're too busy. I read somewhere once that if a doctor were to try to read all the new research into all the new developments in medicine that were being made available, he would be falling behind. Even if he was reading for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, he would fall behind because there's too much information surfacing. He's got to actually, or she has got to actually carry on in practice doing what he or she does. And you're the same. You're the same. You couldn't get a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week television station that would be able to tell you everything there is to know. So it seems to me that this one is not a crystal clear matter. It's a question of where you lower the boom. Are you unhappy about the likelihood that politicians on your behalf are keeping to themselves, and the judiciary, and the police force, and doctors, and psychologists, and philosophers, and football managers? You know, you. If you believe you should know more, why don't you start by telling people more? You wouldn't, would you? There are things you'd rather keep to yourself. You don't need to know everything. You're too vulnerable. I'm too vulnerable. Every time a harrowing case comes to court, we learn that jurors weep at photographs. We learn that they need counselling afterwards. Police officers involved in 2 or 3 recent cases that I can think of have been given or offered counselling to deal with the way their own minds are working whilst they're searching for somebody who's gone missing. 08700 40 50 60. Do you need to know everything? You don't. I don't want to know everything. I couldn't know everything. There are some things I know that I've learned in my 25 years as a journalist, which I wouldn't tell you. I could tell you. It would be quite lawful, but there are some things I know that I don't want to tell you. What do you say? 08700 40 50 60. You're listening to The Mike Dickin Show. I'm Tommy Boyd. He's on his holes. This is TalkSport.
There's only one man who tells it like it really is.
Hi, this is James Whale. Listen, why don't you voicemail me with whatever you want right now at talksport.net and join me Monday to Thursday nights from 10, only on TalkSport.
That was beautiful.
Sorry, can't help it. Ash makes me laugh. So does James, for the right reasons in both cases. We're talking about what you need to know. I'm talking about what I need to know as a member of the public. And I'm saying, as a member of the public, as a citizen, there are things I don't want to know. I don't need to know. Frightening people is easy. And then there's the $64,000 question. You find out that there is somebody whose past activities cause you concern right now, and they live in your neighbourhood. Then what do you do? Apart from worry. 08700 40 50 60. You can email the show by going to our website, which is talksport.net. Philip's on the line from Harrow. Morning, Philip.
Morning, Tommy. I'm actually talking about this subject because I was abused by my aunt when I was a child, as was my sister. And I'm very concerned in the need to know sort of item you're talking about. I think it's up to every individual to have the right to inquire. And can I just quote the figures that this News of the World campaign, which has caused a hell of a lot of disruption and confusion as well as anything else in people's minds. They quoted a figure of 400 plus sexual assaults on children since they started their campaign about 3 weeks ago. Now, I happen to know, because I've studied this subject on an academic level as well, that was grossly inaccurate. The omission was that they quoted only assaults by strangers. In fact, the number of assaults on children, as in my case, in domestic circumstances by their own family, including, sadly, in some cases, parents, is 10 times that number. So it should have been nearer 5,000. And this might be a frightening figure, but it is a fact. And I'll double-check this with the NSPCC, as you can as well. And that they will confirm that the annual number of sexual assaults on children in their own domestic circumstances is over 600,000. The number from outside, i.e. strangers, is 60,000.
Okay, can I just, because I'm writing this down, are you talking about individuals or individual assaults?
No, number of assault. I don't know if it's one individual making more than one assault, but I think it's probably a mixture. But I would think it's more likely each individual assault. But hello.
Yes, hello, carry on.
But I think you'd have to check with the NSPCC on this. What I'm saying is that amongst those crowds of slavering vigilantes, there must have been some parents who themselves were or are abusers, and this would make them perhaps go home and reflect if they knew that the public knew this, and that some of the people they're targeting, of course, were probably fathers or mothers or whatever, because there are some women, who abuse, as in my case. And this is an example of information which I think would be good for this country to know, because they are, in fact, getting inflamed and all excited, quite rightly in the cause, but not always in the right direction.
Okay, Philip, thank you very much indeed for your call, and you made some extremely good points. You can name and shame, but if you're naming and shaming a parent, that family will already have dealt with that problem or be dealing with that problem as best they can, and it isn't going to help that problem. It seems to me that what's useful in this case is not so much details of names and addresses as education about what is going on, what happens, what it could be, what unimaginable thing it could be that triggers in an adult who presumably lose control of themselves for a period of time an act which is so unspeakable that one hopes that even they, when the red mist has cleared, recognise that all is far from well. But then, how can we find out about things like that when it seems to me that nobody has done the research into things like that, and the information simply isn't available, so you can't even educate yourself? 08700 40 50 60. I'm Tommy Boyd, in for Mike Dickin. You're tuned to TalkSport. Karen Mercer has the travel. Morning, Karen.
On 1089 and 10:53 a.m. TalkSport.
A bit later on the show, we're going to be finding out about animal aids. If you care about animals, or conversely feel that too many people care too much about animals, or if you're that category of human being I like to think I belong to, and I like to think you belong to as well, you'd like simply to find out more, we're going to be talking to Animal Aid, who are holding their Mad Science Awards today. They'll be giving information about some animal experiments which they claim are several bridges too far. And I will be suggesting that if you're likely to find that harrowing, that you just turn your ears away from the radio for a prescribed period of time, 30 seconds or whatever. But if that's something that you have well-rehearsed views on and feel that you need to publicise them, then 08700 40 50 60, but that's a little bit later on the show. We're on the business of how much you need to know, whether in fact there is a point at which you don't need to know certain things, either because it's too complex for you, and that's not intended as an insult. There are things that are too complex. I mean, crikey, the formation of the England defence would have been too complex for Einstein. There are certain things that, simply we don't need to busy our heads with. And also there are certain things which are quite frankly so harrowing, they're best left to other people. 08700 40 50 60. Nigel's in Temple Fortune. Morning, Nigel.
Good morning, Tommy. You sound so relaxed in the day shift compared to the night shift. So chilled out you do. Now, I have to disagree with you, I'm afraid, because I think we need to know lots more than we do at the moment. And I think we need a Freedom of Information Act, which I have in the United States. You mentioned that things are too harrowing for people to know, but that's perhaps being a little bit generalistic. Surely in a democracy, people should be able to make their minds up for themselves. And when you've mentioned about policemen getting upset and emergency services getting upset, well, that's pretty tough, isn't it? That's a job that they have to do. That's a job that they've chosen to do, and it may be particularly traumatic and unpleasant for some of the things that they see and have to deal with. But that's unfortunately part of the job, and to go around suing their employers for trauma and stress, I think, is a bit beyond the pale. Things like the thing with Kosovo recently about we get to know things weeks and months later. I mean, why is there so much secrecy in this country about everything?
Okay. Well, you haven't been paying terribly much attention to the programme. I'm no more relaxed this morning than I am in the evenings, point one. Who cares? Point two, freedom of information in the United States. So they know everything, do they, in the United States? They know what's going on, do they? Is that right?
Well, they know a lot more than what we do here, Tommy, because, you see, they have that information that they're allowed to have.
Well, that's a very difficult judgment to make, if you don't mind me saying so. Well, first of all, that can't be quantified, so it is a difficult judgment to make.
Well, it can be quantified. Because,
how do you quantify the amount of information? For example, how much do you know about...
Let me give you an answer.
How much do you... Let me ask you a specific question. How much do you know about the missing American nuclear bomb?
Well, I don't know about it.
You don't know anything about it at all?
No.
Okay.
But, Tommy, all I'm trying to perhaps get across to you is this, is that in the United States, they have far more information made available to them than we do here, because that's the way it works. Of course countries have to have secrets. We understand that.
Secondly, your second point, I agree with you. Police officers, nurses, doctors are trained to deal with and have chosen to deal with harrowing images, harrowing details. Jurors aren't trained at all. And members of the public sitting at home watching the television news at 9:15 certainly aren't.
Well, listen, last week, Tommy, there was an awful explosion in Moscow, wasn't there? Dreadful explosion. Okay, where I think it was 7 or 8 people got blown to smithereens. I work in the newspaper business, and you know newspapers quite well, I'm sure, because of your journalistic experience. And every newspaper has what they call all-wire monitors, where images are transmitted around the world from newspapers, from agencies, from photographers on ISDN links, and pictures are dropping onto those screens every few seconds of everything from Al Gore in the United States to sports people around the world. And images drop in of people blown up. Now, they're not very pleasant to see. In fact, they're horrible to see, okay? And I'm not going to describe them, but, it doesn't take much common sense to know what a person looks like when they've been hit by an explosion. It's very unpleasant. And you see people in Sierra Leone shot. These sort of pictures come on the screen, but I have to deal with it. Yeah. I don't go around suing my employer. But it's not pleasant for me to see, don't get me wrong. No. It's very distasteful.
But we're in agreement that there are certain images that you wouldn't show the public simply because it would be too much.
Well, but yes, I think you're right. But if you look at Europe...
Thank you. That's all I needed. Thank you, Nigel. There's no black and white about this one. We're just looking for some common ground, grey though it may be. 08700 40 50 60. On to animal affairs in about 10 minutes' time. We're looking forward to a word with Max Clifford on information and how it's handled by those who get to handle it very shortly. I'm Tommy Boyd, in for Mike Dickin. You're tuned to TalkSport.
There's no lottery about sports coverage on TalkSport. The best sports coverage on the radio. TalkSport.
Big piece in one of the big papers today about whether or not the public should be told just a little more than they are about things that arguably might affect them, or things that might arguably affect the way they vote, or might perhaps affect the way they think. 08700 40 50 60. And then, of course, you have the livid debate which is ongoing about whether or not those who have been convicted of sex offences should have their names and addresses published. Let's go to John, who's called from Enfield. I did mention a moment ago that I felt that there are things that should be withheld by those who know, just as good parents withhold information from their children until they feel that the time is absolutely right, which, of course, maybe never. John in Enfield, I understand, wants to take issue with this. John, welcome to TalkSport.
Oh, good morning, Tommy. As a journalist, by not telling the public everything, I don't think you're doing your job. Let the public decide what the outcome should be. I believe in open and entirely free speech.
Yes, so do I.
And I think you're making the decision and not allowing the public in general to make their decision, because it is the collective body that is actually going to decide in which direction we're going to go.
Well, it's exactly your kind of leap to judgment, John, that discourages me from making certain pieces of information known, because they're often misunderstood.
Well, are you afraid of going to prison or saying things where they say you mustn't say that?
Yeah, you see, you're just curious about what it is that I'm withholding, aren't you?
Well, naturally I am, because there could be things that you're withholding that we should know about.
Well, I'm going to make that judgment for you.
Well, I don't want you to make judgments for me. I want to make judgments for myself.
Not making judgments necessarily for you.
I've got a soul, my own soul, and my own way of making assessment, and so have other people.
Let me tell you what I've learned, John, in broadcasting and journalism. What I've learned is that people like yourself, who merely have a distant interest in most news events, because not many news events actually touch your life, okay, are rarely deeply touched by news stories. But those about whom those news stories are, those people who are put up in the news stories, those people who might have lost relatives in a disaster, or those people whose private lives might be subject to speculation, are deeply, grotesquely scarred.
Yes, well, I would like to give them
reportage.
my compassion and have the opportunity to do that.
You don't have the opportunity to do that because you're too far away from it.
Well, shall we say, I perhaps could influence things. If something has gone wrong, I could perhaps do something through my MP. That is my only representation to the way this country should be run. It's a very poor way, but that's the way I've got to do it.
It is a very poor way, I agree with you, and it doesn't work like that. On the whole, you don't manage to affect any action in any of the important stories of the day and the world. You might manage to get your bin emptied on time, but that's not necessarily what we're talking about.
Many years ago, I took my bin to the council.
There you are, you see?
Because they would, that was personal action.
There you are.
Do.
That's good. Good for you. Stick to it. Don't worry too much about which football manager is bonking which pop star. 08700 40 50 60. We have to talk to Max Clifford, of course, next on this one. It's Tommy Boyd in for Mike Dickin. Let's get the news.
On 1089 and 1053 AM, Tommy Boyd on TalkSport.
Can't really talk about handling information without talking to Max Clifford. Good morning, Max, PR guru. Oh, we'll talk to Max in just a second. 08700 40 50 60. A little bit later on, we're going to be discussing the Animal Aid Mad Science Awards, in which they will be making awards to teams of researchers who they say have conducted grotesque experiments, including putting live chickens in wind tunnels. That's later. Max is with us. Good morning, Max.
Hello, Tommy.
Hi, we're talking about information and handling it, and whether or not there are things that the public simply don't need to know, either because they're not clever enough, just like you and me, or perhaps they're too vulnerable to find out about. And I wanted to get your take.
Well, all I can say is that I think in a healthy democracy we know what's going on. And most of the things that I've seen revealed years later, which people have said would have caused a lot of problems, would possibly have just have caused problems for the people that made the decisions, had the public have known about it. So I would say that only in very exceptional circumstances do we not have the right to know.
Okay, then there's timing, because I've seen you quoted, perhaps it was misquoted, but I've seen you quoted as saying that you have you have confidants who have information which you're going to use, for example, in connection with possibly a future leader of the current opposition.
Well, I mean, that's very simple. I mean, if by bringing something in the public domain, the public benefit, then I think you can justify the ends, justify the means. In other words, I was referring, I think, to Benjamin Pell, the bin man. Now, if Benjamin had come to me with the kind of tittle-tattle, Lord Levy's tax returns, the kind of things like that, I wouldn't have been remotely interested, because it's of no importance at all. Therefore, the ends don't justify the means. But if he'd come to me about something that, shall we say, Tony Blair was up to, or Gordon Brown, which was totally corrupt, then I would have brought it out. So then the ends justify the means. That's really what I'm trying to say. You've got to look at every situation on its own merits.
But in relation to the Tony Martin case, you found yourself at loggerheads with the judiciary, his former solicitor and his former barrister, who believe that court cases should be confined entirely to the court and their process, and that by inflaming or engaging public opinion, even if you're saying that all you're doing is informing the public, is wrong.
Well, I find that a bit hard to take, particularly as Nick Macon, his solicitor, was giving interviews to the media and supplying stories to the media for months and months and months. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Or maybe what he means, if he's saying that, is only he should be doing it, I shouldn't. But the end of the day, what matters surely is that the public opinion that is now so firmly behind Tony Martin, and the huge amount of publicity the media have given it to it, has led to Tony Blair making comments and William Hague jumping on the bandwagon. I believe that possibly has helped Tony Martin have a chance with his appeal. I certainly don't think it's done anything to damage his chances. I mean, for Anthony Scrivener to say it should be decided in the courts, well, of course it will be decided in the courts, but he's already been to court once and lost. So, there's a little bit more to it than has been led to believe. Plus, I've had discussions with Tony Scrivener, and he said to me he was quite happy that the media were so supportive to Tony Martin, and was very appreciative of, my part in making sure that the public were kept informed as to what had happened, and were registering how they thought this was a miscarriage of justice. So it doesn't really add up. I think it's a little bit of sour grapes. He's been sacked, nothing to do with Max Clifford. He's been sacked by Tony Martin. He's sacked his team because he felt they weren't doing a good job for him.
Are you still working for him?
Yes, I'm still working unpaid for Tony Martin. And
what does the association amount to at this moment in time?
What does what, sorry?
What does your association with him amount to at this moment in time?
Well, it's basically, for example, you read in the papers today that he's sacked his defence team. Well, that information came from Max Clifford, to the Press Association and various other television and radio outlets that have been on to me wanting to know why. There have been various things. There was a piece in The Sun yesterday. There was a piece in The Sun last week just saying how the public were outraged that the family of the tragically murdered young man was suing for compensation. It's basically keeping things in the public domain, Tommy, so everybody knows what's going on. It's the public that makes up its own mind, not Max Clifford. But 90-odd% of the British public, including listeners to Talk Radio, said that they were totally supportive of Tony Martin and he shouldn't be in prison.
But you've got a famously accurate thermometer when it comes to taking the temperature of public opinion. You know what makes everybody tick, it seems, to everybody. Do you trust the public to get things right in connection with very inflammable matters such as paedophilia and hanging? For example, capital punishment.
No, I mean, I've never been a believer in capital punishment because it's been shown up to have been, mistaken on so many occasions. That's the problem. I do think that with regard to this recent business of paedophiles, then I do think that there's pluses and minuses. I think that in terms of Rebecca Wade, that what she's done and what the News of the World have done have brought the whole thing very much into the public domain. I do think that people do have the right to know that if they've got young children that there's a paedophile living next door. I think that basically in a fair democracy we should be made aware of these things. We should have the right to know. I know that if I had young children and I was living next door to a paedophile, I'd want to know. I'm sure you would.
Okay, then let me ask you what I've called the $64,000 question on that one. Supposing you know that there is someone with a record four streets away from you, what do you do?
Keep an eye on them.
How do you do that?
Well, I mean, if you are part of a community and you're all keeping your eye on them, then it's a much better chance than what we've got now, where you don't know.
But it's this business of keeping an eye. I've asked callers this on the nighttime shows that I do here. Okay, keeping an eye on them, how do you do that? Do you have a rota of neighbours who stand outside the gate? What do you do?
The main thing is that prevention is better than cure. You keep your children away. You keep a watchful eye on them. You make sure that they're not around these people. If they are going to be playing outside, then somebody is keeping an eye on them. It's common sense,
But we're all doing that anyway. I mean,
well, I don't think we are, because if you don't know they're a paedophile, how can you possibly do it?
Yeah,
if you don't know the person next door to you is a paedophile, how can you keep an eye on them? Why would you keep an eye on them?
Well, I think you'll find, Max, that pretty much every child these days, if anything, is supervised too much. You've read about it. I've seen it in action. If you collect your child from... I run a junior football club. I have to make sure that every child is collected by a prescribed parent.
That's not the same thing, is it? You don't think you should have the right to know?
Yeah, but I'm not taking those precautions because somebody's been identified in our neighbourhood as being a sex offender. I'm taking those precautions, quite frankly, because so much publicity has accrued to the occasional case that we tragically do get that everybody is on a knife edge.
Yes. So what you're saying that...
Certainly not. Did it sound as though I was saying that?
No, that's what was coming across. I mean, I know that you're playing devil's advocate here, but I don't think you're on really much of a strong case if you're saying that we shouldn't be made aware if there's a paedophile next door to us. I don't think there's any possible justification for that statement.
Well, if we're going to lock horns, I'd like to take you back to what we actually do if we find out that there's somebody 4 streets away from us.
What we do, or what I do? I don't go and attack them.
No, you don't, but what do you do?
I keep an eye on them.
Yeah, again, I'm still not quite clear about exactly what behaviour that is.
Well, what it means is, if I've got young children and they're playing outside and my next door neighbour is a paedophile, that I make sure that my wife, somebody, is looking them, being with them, around them, if they're playing around him. That's what I would do. It's called common sense.
Okay, Max, we could go on all day about this one, but I think we probably see broadly eye to eye. It's just the dotting of the lowercase j's. Thanks, mate.
Okay.
Good to talk to you. Max Clifford, of course. I wanted to ask him about Fulham, and they've accrued some pretty good publicity over the weekend, so he's on form in every regard. 08700 40 50 60 is the number. I'm Tommy Boyd, in for Mike Dickin. In a moment, we'll be talking to Animal Aid about their Mad Science Awards. They're handing out a dozen or so awards today to organisations, research organisations who have conducted animal experiments, which they say need to be brought to the public's attention because they are abhorrent. We're opening the switchboard on that one now. 08700 40 50 60. Are you concerned? Of course you should be, about how other people treat animals. But also, do you feel as though we're too sentimental about... Well, they're not God's creatures, I don't suppose you'd say, if you're in that particular camp. 08700 40 50 60 is the number. You're tuned to TalkSport.
On 1089 and 10:53 a.m. TalkSport.
Okay, today an organisation called Animal Aid, who you may have heard of, are issuing their Mad Science Awards. And to tell us a little bit more about that, we have Andrew Tyler, who is their director. Good morning, Andrew. We've lost Andrew. No worries. I'll tell you what, we'll take a call from another Andrew who just wants to refer back to our discussion a little bit earlier on information. Andrew's in Southampton. Morning, Andrew.
Morning, Tommy.
Hi.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I know it's a very emotive issue about freedom of information, etc., etc. The difficulty with the Sex Offenders Act as it stands and the register, and lots of people don't know this, is that there are a very wide cross range of people actually on there, from molesters, rapists, and murderers of children, to people that are actually waiting for appeal who have been wrongly accused of a crime they haven't committed, and people that are not guilty but are convicted but are still on the sex offender register. They're all grouped as paedophiles, or whatever you like to class them. And the public, I've not heard this view being mentioned in any form of media whatsoever so far. I wanted to know what, at the end of the day, it's like one apple spoils a barrel. And the other thing, with Sarah Payne's murder, they don't know who it is yet, or they might have an idea. But that person may be a new sex offender, so they're not going to be on the register anyway.
Yeah, there are lots of maybes on that one that the courts will get to, and then we have to get to it after the courts get to it. But you made a good point, and particularly made a good point in terms of the gradation of the crimes that have been committed by the people who are on
There is a massive cross-section, say from the not guilty but convicted to very sad, wired-up wrong people. It's a massive cross-section there. People on the sex offenders register in loving relationships where the girlfriend has actually said that the boyfriend's raped her. And, again, the case may be going to appeal, but even if it's going to appeal and it's going to be quashed, that person is on the sex offenders register, until it is resolved. And that is the difficulty. I do agree totally that people that aren't wired up properly should be basically on a... At the end of the day, all the information, if you want to get all the information, you can get it anyway. There's no doubt about that. But the difficulty is it's one apple spoils a barrel. And unfortunately, as I say, there are, not guilty people that are on that register, but have been convicted. So how do you look after those people? Because unfortunately, they're looked at as touching up or molesting 7 children.
Can I ask you a question?
In actual fact, they haven't.
Yeah, can I ask you a question? Have you a conviction for anything?
No.
No.
But I know I've got some, I've got a friend who's going through this situation at the moment, and to give you a quick outline, very, very drunk in a nightclub, touched up a girl. She was underage. He didn't know that. He was a bit drunk, having a good night out. He agrees he shouldn't have touched her. He was in a nightclub for 18-year-olds. The girl was 12 in a nightclub. Okay. There's that kind of situation. So
allegedly and so forth. All right, listen, Andrew, thank you very much indeed for your call. You raised a number of issues. We could do an entire series. But you've reminded me of a piece of information which is being pursued by a political columnist in one of the broadsheets, which brings from the revelation from one of our cabinet, his name I can't remember, it might have been Robin Cook, that no less than 30% of adult males in Britain have a conviction, one conviction or more, to their name, which overlaps what we've been talking about, because if the names and addresses of sex offenders are to be published, then how long will it be before there are calls for all information about everybody's activities through the courts to be made public? But we'll get round to that another day. We have Andrew Tyler, Director of Animal Aid, and we'll be speaking to him about Animal Aid's Mad Science Awards next.
On 1089 and 1053 AM, TalkSport.
Animal Aid's Mad Science Awards are happening today. I think it's today. We've got Andrew Tyler, Director of Animal Aid, with us. Morning, Andrew.
Morning, Tommy.
The awards are happening today. What are they?
Well, every year we hand out about a dozen Mad Science Awards, and there's usually a theme. In the past, it's been vivisection to test weapons, and other times to test drugs. This year, the theme is vivisection conducted in the service of factory farming. So there, if you like, two evils that meet head on. And the background to this is that factory farming, intensive production of animals, really took off in the 60s when animals started being put in sheds, chickens and pigs in a big way, huge sheds, 40 up to 100,000 birds in a single shed. Cattle, new selective breeding systems so that they give huge amounts of milk and so on, and sheep are manipulated to give more animals throughout the year. And because they're being pressed so hard, they get sicker, they're more enfeebled, they're prone to all kinds of disease, leg problems, infectious foot rot and reproduction problems. And it's at this point, and by the way, a lot of these systems were devised by the experts in the field, who are the vets and the scientists, you know, the exploitation of reproductive capacity. When these problems occur and production starts falling, where the animals are getting sick in a very big way, they call in the scientists again and say, you know, clean up the mess. And so all these experiments where they cut into animals' brains and take away part of their brain, cut into their rumens and, you know, expose the uterus and inject their brains with lethal viruses to understand diseases that are a product of intensification. This is what it's about. Today is part of the package. Vivisection goes with factory farming.
Right. Can I ask whether the Research Defence Society are going to be receiving an award today?
Well, they're perennially on our award list.
Could I introduce Dr. Mark Matfield, who's Director of the Research Defence Society, who's been listening to what you have to say. As you know, Andrew, we're not catching anybody out here.
No.
Dr. Matfield, good morning.
Good morning.
Can I give you an opportunity, first of all, just to set out your stall and maybe respond to what you heard Andrew say there?
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that most animal experimentation is for medical research. It's tried to develop cures for diseases. I rather love the way that Andrew's trying to blame us for factory farming as well. Let's get it straight. I've looked at the material that Animal Aid have produced for this. I've got it here in front of me. Not much of it is about factory farming at all. Most of it's about 5 out of 12 of these research projects they've highlighted are to improve animal welfare in agriculture.
Is that right, Andrew?
No, I mean, he obviously didn't listen to what I was saying. If you stress and go and develop intensive systems, animals get sick more and more often, and production falls. And so
I heard what you said, Andrew.
Let me just finish this point. And so the research has the twin aim of picking up the mess in terms of sick and disease and feeble animals, and trying to right the fall in production, which results from going down the intensive route. So it's not for the animals. Let's not kid you. Let's not kid the listeners. This is to help animals. It's to exploit them further.
So research aimed at reducing the pain felt by lambs when they're castrated, that's not in the benefit of the animals, is it? Of course it is.
No, the way to benefit animals is to prohibit, which is now permitted, to prohibit shepherds from cutting open the scrotum of lambs up to 3 months of age without anaesthetic and ripping out their testicles.
I mean, I think we'd all agree with that, wouldn't we? I mean,
well, why are they doing experiments when they can resolve that problem?
I mean, look, if we could do away with factory farming, I think we'd all be a great deal happier. But the fact is, that's what farmers do. Farmers, I have to say, not scientists, as you were trying to say earlier. That's what farmers do. And if that's the way agriculture is run, I think it makes perfect sense to do some research to try to improve the welfare of the animals.
I don't think you understand the history of this whole process. Right now, and from the beginning, you have scientists and vets included who have been working away to exploit further the reproductive capacity of cattle, of pigs. They've developed multiple embryo transfer.
Okay,
and
I accept that. And other ones who are working to improve their welfare. And that's what this is.
Scientists and vets, a proportion of them, are directly implicit and culpable in these new systems. They excuse them, they prop them up with drugs and new regimens, and they excuse it with the data they produce.
So
I would like to know, are you here to defend this research or not? Are you here to defend this research or not?
Research which is aimed at improving animal welfare, I would wholeheartedly defend. No trouble at all.
This takes us further down the intensification route. Further and further down. It's bad science, and all it does is legitimise what's taking place.
Of course not, Andrew. You're trying to blame people who are looking for solutions to a problem for the problem itself. Can't you see that that's not one and the same?
Well, I don't think you're addressing the problem, the issue. What I've said to you is that a number of the vets and scientists involved have companies. They're trading in embryos. They're working on cloning methods to increase the reproductive potential of these animals. And you know, the reason cattle are so sick now, cows, is because they're being selectively bred, and they've done experiments like the invasive reproductive experiments we've highlighted to make sure that they can bear animals on a constant cycle and give more milk, and that makes them sick. And BSE is a product of intensification, so is E. coli 0157 and the high rates of salmonella. These scientists should be speaking out against this and not being complicit in it.
Okay, and listen, I want to come in here at this moment and invite you gentlemen to continue this fascinating debate after the news, which we're going to take in just a second. You're tuned to TalkSport. I have with me Dr. Mark Matfield, who is Director of the Research Defence Society, who, as I understand it, uses animals in his research, but claims it is humane. He is, for the record, and this is quite important, opposed to what he considers, I understand, to be frivolous animal testing for cosmetics, for example. And he is talking with Andrew Tyler, who is Director of Animal Aid, whose awards, the Animal Aid Mad Science Awards, are taking place today. If you would like to contribute to the conversation or to take up either of these gentlemen on anything you hear them saying, the switchboard is open. It's 08700 40 50 60. Or if you would like to contribute, you could do this as well, to our vote. Any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. And it's quite specific on that. The numbers yes and no in just a second. I'll reprise. Any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. Yes, ring 0900 9 111 300. If no, 09009 111 400. I'll reprise those numbers again immediately after the news. Yes, then the last three digits 300. No, the last three digits 400. You're listening to the Mike Dickin Show. He's on his holidays. I'm Tommy Boyd. You're tuned to TalkSport.
On 1089 and 1053 AM, Tommy Boyd on TalkSport.
Talking about animal experiments on the programme. I'm Tommy Boyd, in for Mike Dickin, whose show this is. He's on holiday. You're tuned to TalkSport. This show talks about what's in the news between 10 and 12. Looking forward to Nicky Horn arriving at midday. I have with me, from Animal Aid, an organisation which is today making what it calls its Mad Science Awards to researchers who have conducted animal experiments which they consider abhorrent and should be brought to the public's attention. And we have moved around those, I think, quite tastefully. So it's thanks for that to Andrew Tyler, who is Director of Animal Aid. Hello again, Andrew.
Yes, hello, Tommy.
And he is talking with, and very interesting it is too, and quite a warm conversation, he's talking with Dr. Mark Matfield, who is Director of the Research Defence Society. They use animals in experiments. Hello again, Dr. Matfield.
Hi, Tommy.
Just quickly, before we go back to your conversation, our vote line has the following proposition, and telephone numbers for either yes or no will follow. The proposition is, any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. If yes, call 09009 111 300. If no, call 09009 111 400. Andrew Tyler, Director of Animal Aid. Can I just start by referring back to our vote line with you?
Yes. Can I just adjust this mic? It's going to crunch.
By all means, don't worry about it. I do it all the time. Listen, that's me. That proposition, any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. That must be something that you would think about.
Well, this is the kind of moral blackmail that the vivisection community engages in. I mean, I'll make my position very clear. We oppose all animal experiments on moral and ethical grounds because we think to systematically set up a research system that depends on exploiting and being abusive to animals is wrong. The second reason we oppose animal experiments is because the animal model is a very poor model for human beings, and you simply cannot trust the data. Sometimes the data corresponds, more often than it doesn't, so it's not a reliable scientific method. And you might say, well, why does it go on? Because it's a habit, because it's a convenient, easily replicatable, quotes, tool, the animal, particularly the rat. It can be replicated, used and disposed of, and it's a substitute for proper rational science.
Dr. Matfield, the vote line at the moment is running 59%, 41% against you and your position. Did you want to come back to what Andrew was saying there?
Yes, of course. I mean, what Andrew's saying...
A pair of you are both on, by the way.
And what Andrew's saying is nonsense. I mean, I'm a medical researcher. The people I represent are medical researchers. At the end of the day, we don't want to do animal experiments. We want to do medical research. We want to find out what causes diseases and how we can prevent them or cure those diseases. Some parts of that research, actually only quite a small part of it these days, can only be done by studying animals, by studying laboratory rats, mice and other laboratory animals. There's no other way to do it. So if that bit of research is important enough, then I'm afraid we say yes. Look, the priority here is to do the medical research to be able to treat diseases. And if we're weighing up using some rats or mice or rabbits, and that's what the overwhelming majority of laboratory animals are, they're rodents. And on the other hand, finding information which will say help us understand the cause of cancer or help us develop a vaccine against AIDS, I know which side I think is right quite clearly.
Well, that's quite interesting because Mark Matfield has acknowledged in the past that the rat and mouse, which are used comprehensively for cancer research, I think it's about 300,000 every year, is not a very good model at all because they suffer a different kind of cancer. They suffer a hard tissue cancer, sarcomas. And let me just quickly go on to AIDS. In fact, there is a developing thesis, and there's going to be a symposium later this year, a scientific symposium, that AIDS in Africa began because of an experimental vaccine program for polio in Central Africa. And what they did is, and they still do today, they grind up monkey kidneys, chimpanzee kidneys in this case, and use it, just a minute, and use that as a culture. In the 50s they used chimpanzees and use that as a culture medium to grow the vaccine. And because the culture medium, the monkey tissue, was contaminated with SIV, which is the equivalent of AIDS in primates, that crossed over and gave the people of Africa HIV and AIDS. Now, that is not proven, but it shows you to use monkey tissue like that, you have a serious problem of contamination, passing on some very serious outbreaks of disease.
Let me respond to that, Andrew. As you said yourself, that's not proven. That's a theory. There are plenty of other theories, and we don't know which is correct at the moment. But like all of these things, if you're trying to find out what caused a disease, the origins of it, you've got to do the research to find the answers. I think the problem with your position is that you try to reject it all and say no animal experimentation has ever worked. Because obviously if you admitted that, your arguments would fall apart.
No, I say that it's not a reliable method, it's not scientific.
Oh, okay. Do you accept that some animal experimentation has worked and produced medical benefit?
No, I say that if you...
No, you don't then. So you don't accept that?
No, I say that the whole history and current process of using animals is unreliable and immoral, because it is not a methodology that can be trusted.
I think you're trying to dodge here a bit, Andrew. Do you accept that some animal experimentation has produced medical benefit? Yes or no? No. Okay. No. So how come...
Because the better way of getting to where we want to get...
Hang on, Andrew. How come if you survey...
Hang on. I do want to hear this one. I want to hear the animal research that definitely has led to medical breakthroughs.
Okay, well, very obvious major example is the development of insulin to treat diabetes. Something like, I think, 7 million people's lives have been saved because of that research.
No, that's disputed. There's a whole complex history of how insulin was developed and refined.
That research was done on dogs and rabbits. That's an undeniable fact. It's in the literature, medical literature. They gave the Nobel Prize to the people who made the discovery.
Well, yes,
so
I mean, it's all
you're
a club,
saying
isn't it?
you're saying that they're wrong and you're right.
You know very well that the whole history of how insulin was developed is heavily disputed.
No, it's not. Only by you.
No, come on. What you're doing.
Well, okay, I'm going to step in here and ask, because I do like to tie people down, keep things quite tight. Andrew, can you give other sources, reputable sources, who do dispute that the value of the research done on animals in the pursuit of insulin, and can you name them?
Well, not off the top of my head, but Banton and Best is often cited as
who are they?
This was a research team that did research on dogs, and then it's a whole complicated history, and I don't have the information in front of me, frankly.
Okay.
But the whole history of insulin development and whether or not this part of it was key or that part, and how it was purified and how it came to be safe for use for people, is heavily disputed.
No,
it'll be argued.
It's incredibly well documented. This is some of the most famous medical research that's ever happened. Do you think it's not going to be totally well documented? Of course it is. The books have been written about this, and none of those books at all, apart from sort of animal rights tracts, have ever disputed that the key findings were the research on rabbits and dogs.
Well, look, I've stated my case on that. Tell me if you accept that this is valid research, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oxford University Experimental Psychology Department. They took hold of a group of monkeys. They injected them in the brain with a very dangerous chemical. And they damaged. It was a chemical that damaged their brains.
Well, I kind of have to know what chemical to know.
Well, hang on, you'll get to the point. It damaged their brain. That was the point, to cause lesions in the brain,
right? And
also surgical mutilation to cause lesions in the brain, so that they to cause disrepair in the brain. And then when they came round, and in some cases, I think it took 18 hours for them to recover consciousness, they starved them, showed them food, and then monitored their frustration symptoms, which included pulling of their own fur and so forth. Now, this was a psychology experiment looking at motivation and functioning of the brain. Are you going to support that? Aren't there enough people with brain damage, unfortunately, who can be looked at in clinical terms with full consent, if not of them, but with their family, without doing this to monkeys?
Okay,
monkeys aren't people.
Let me answer that. I mean, this research starts off, as you were describing, when a patient has an accident and part of their brain is damaged, rarely you find that produces a particular effect. Like, one of the better known ones is they lose the ability to recognize words on just normal words on paper, and that tells us a lot about how the brain works. It identifies a particular area of the brain as the one responsible for our ability to know what a word is. And other similar accidents where patients have got these very strange losses of abilities because of damage to a very particular part of their brain have shown us that particular bits of the brain, for example, have the ability, that's where the ability to recognize a person's face resides. But the problem is the damage done is usually over a fairly large bit of the brain, so we don't know how exactly the brain works in fine detail from these accidental damage studies to humans.
So
the only way we're going to be able to do that more accurately is by studying. In fact, their brains are closest to ours. If we want to tackle human brain diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, we're going to have to learn more about how the human brain works.
Now, I have to interrupt you, gentlemen, if I may. I hope you don't mind, but this is Tommy Boyd here, and I have to just interrupt you there purely for procedural programming matters. But I'm very grateful. We're all very grateful for hearing you state your cases. I'll give you an update on our vote line, which will continue to run through to the end of the programme. Am I right? We will continue to run the vote line through to the end of the programme. At the moment, it's standing 63 yes, 37% no. I'll remind you how to vote on that if you want to. Andrew Tyler, thank you and good luck with Animal AIDS Mad Science Awards. Dr. Mark Matfield, Director of the Research Defence Society, thank you also for taking part in the conversation. And I hope I don't patronise the gentleman by saying perhaps on your behalf, Dr. Mark Matfield, thank you very much indeed for the research and the work that you do to help us all lead healthier and perhaps longer lives, although sometimes we get a bit concerned about everything that gets done. And Andrew Tyler, Director of Animal Aid, we do appreciate how much you care about animals. It's just that we're not animals, we're people. That's what we think. Or am I wrong? 09009 111 300. If you say yes, any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. 09009 111 400 if you want to vote no. I wonder how Karen Mercer would vote. We'll get the travel first. Here she is.
On TalkSport.
Been talking this morning about animal experiments. 08700 40 50 60 is the number, so it's over to you now. You're tuned to TalkSport. I'm Tommy Boyd in for Mike Dickin, and Kieran calls from Norfolk.
Hello.
Kieran, welcome to TalkSport.
Hello, Tommy. How are you?
Fine.
Right. This chap going on about animal experiments haven't done any good. My daughter was born with a hole in her diaphragm back in 94. The repair technique was actually tried out on animals before it was used on human beings. And because of that, my daughter's alive today. So he is talking utter rubbish.
Okay. Rather than have me test your views, would you like to talk to another caller who disagrees with you?
I can put them on, but my daughter's testament to how animal experiments working.
All right, well, let me bring Andrew in from Caution. And that doesn't work, but it was worth a try, for goodness sake. All right, Kieran, can I just quickly ask you then on that, how did you find out that testing this procedure on animals was crucial to the development of this technique?
It was tried back by doctors working on basically hopeless cases of holes in the diaphragm, and virtually 99% of the babies died. So instead of trying it on the humans, they then made holes in, I believe it was pigs, in their diaphragms, and they tried it. They tried various materials to see which would work, which wouldn't, and in the end they sort of came out with a procedure that worked. And on my daughter, in my daughter's case, she's got a Gore-Tex patch in her diaphragm.
Okay, Karen, thanks for your call. 08700 40 come to air on this one. Here's the proposition. Any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. If you agree and want to vote yes, it's 09009 111 300. If no, it's 09009 111 400.
Call now.
1089 and 1053 AM.
It's TalkSport. I'm Tommy Boyd in for Mike Dickin whilst he's on his holidays, and on the day that Animal Aid are giving out their Mad Science Awards to researchers who they consider have conducted unnecessary and grotesque experiments on animals. We're taking calls on the subject, and we also have a vote line, another half an hour to vote on that one. It's currently standing at 60% yes, 40% no. To paraphrase that 60%, say no to animal experiments. I'll give you the proposition and the telephone number again in a couple of minutes. Derek McGovern will be along shortly to point you towards the best football bets as the Premiership gets underway on Saturday, and also we'll be finding out whether he thinks that Tiger Woods is a safe bet at something like 15-8, 13-8, down as tight as 6-4 in some places for the USPGA Championship, which tees off later this week. Steve's on the line from Blackpool on the issue of animal experiments. Morning, Steve.
Good morning.
Welcome to TalkSport.
My suggestion, Tommy, is instead of experimenting on the animals, why don't we experiment on the paedophiles, the convicted paedophiles in this country, and also the other convicted thugs?
Well, let me try something that I don't normally like on you. Do you have children?
No, I don't.
And supposing you did, and supposing one of your sons turned out to be a paedophile, would you still be endorsing this ludicrous idea?
No, I wouldn't.
You'd change your mind then?
Well, if I had a son,
yes,
I would disown him if he'd have done something like that.
Yes, but you haven't answered the question. Would you support the idea of your son being used for these experiments?
Yes, I would do.
You would do?
Yes.
Okay, got you there, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Not at all, Steve. Not at all. Just shows I'm paying attention, and I can even play down at that end of the pool. Irene's on the line from Glasgow. Irene, welcome to TalkSport.
Oh, morning, Tommy. I have an opinion to give, and a very latest, heard on the news this morning, point of information for you that ties in with this very nicely. My opinion is that the causes and cures for genetic hereditary diseases could best be obtained by studying the genobank of the people who have these diseases. And the news item that I heard on the radio this morning is that the government are going to stop publishing the names of the directors and scientists of companies who experiment on animals. Now, I think this is the thin edge of the wedge. When it comes to freedom of information, it would appear that instead of it being enlarged, it's being greatly diminished. So the directors of companies who experiment on animals, their names will not appear in any list of directorships.
Irene, thank you for that observation in Glasgow. You're tuned to TalkSport. I'm Tommy Boyd in for Mike Dickin. We'll continue our phone poll on the subject of animal experiments through until Nicky Horn is with you. We'll give you the results just before he arrives at 5 to 12. Be talking to Derek McGovern about good sports bets this week and for the coming weekend right after the news.
On 1089 and 1053 AM, Tommy Boyd on TalkSport.
When we talk to Derek McGovern in about 10 minutes' time about sports betting, we're going to have to talk about the fact that an awful lot of people, particularly on the internet, have been betting on the ongoing outcome of Big Brother, the TV show. And the business of where television is going is a topic of conversation in itself, isn't it? Always has been, but always, well, it always will be as long as there is telly. Who knows if it's going to be around in 10 years' time. We've been talking about Animal Aid's Mad Science Awards. One of the awards is going to a group of researchers who put chickens in a wind tunnel at varying rates of speed, presumably from 10 miles an hour, to see what happened to the chicken, and then at 20, 30, 40. Now, thinking about television programs, there are a lot of people who would watch to see the varying effects of chickens. I would, my crew would this morning, of increased velocity of wind, and we would watch because you'd just be interested to see what would happen if you inserted a chicken into a wind tunnel at 100 miles an hour. These researchers, I have no idea what for, but no doubt ostensibly noble purposes. 08700 40 50 60. Our phone poll on the subject reads as follows: any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. If you say yes to that, it's 09000 9 111 300. If you say no, it's 09009 111 400. And the gap between the two camps on this one is diminishing. Now it's 54% yes, 46% no. And we'll run that for another 20 minutes. And I'll give you the final result, which I reckon will be in the region of 50-50, unless we get a dramatic call which changes people's minds. Have you ever heard a call and it's changed your mind on things? I have, on plenty of occasions, between now and 5 to 12. Let's go to Andrew, who's called from Corsham. Andrew, you're on TalkSport. Good morning.
Good morning, Tommy. Yes, I'm against animal experiments, not only because it's cruel and I like animals, but when you look at, there are cures lying in the rainforest. They've found cures for cancer and heart disease in the plants there, and that the multinational companies are trashing the rainforest. And the World Health Organization, by their own figures, have said there's more drugs on the market than are needed. So it's the multinational drug companies making vast profits because treating disease is profitable, curing it is not, because a lot of diseases are caused by dietary factors and pollution, and there are doctors and nurses who back that up, who are against vivisection. They have nurses against vivisection and doctors against vivisection. And I think if you really like animals, you either like them or not, you wouldn't want to see them experimented on, and they didn't have vivisection before the 19th century. And I just think it's cruel and it's wrong, and I don't like it, and I say there's plenty of alternatives because they've got tissue culture and they've got computer models now, which they are starting to use more often now in the place of animal experiments.
Well, I agree with your sentiment, but I don't agree with what's in your head about cures lying around in the rainforest or computer models being able to simulate test procedures. I think you've watched too many Hollywood movies, but your heart's in the right place, isn't it?
Well, that's a fact. They have found them.
No, don't give me that's a fact that they found cures for cancer in the rainforest.
It's a stated fact.
It may be a stated fact, but it might also be an inaccurately stated fact.
Well, like the ones the scientists come out with.
I'm sorry, but if, for goodness sake, if those cures are lying around in the rainforest, I'd be out there looking for them now.
Well,
I would. I do things like that, Andrew.
Yeah, but they're exploiting and destroying them, aren't they?
You're confusing Hollywood, with Cricklewood.
I'm not confusing Hollywood at all. It's a fact the rainforest the size of a football pitch is disappearing every 5 minutes through greed, through drilling oil and cutting down the forest, exploiting it. Everybody knows the rainforests are disappearing, and that's where these wonderful cures lie. They also lie in our countryside here, which is diminished somewhat. In the plants, the herbal cures are the best, for people.
Thank you for your call. Let's go to Spencer, who calls. He's mobile in Hungerford. Spencer, you're on TalkSport.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I completely agree with animal testing. Completely. Basically. And the people that don't like it, if they don't like it, why don't we do some tests on them? See if they're willing to give up.
All right, sounds like you're out in the open air, no doubt ploughing. Thank you very much indeed for your call there, Spencer. We'll go to Darren, who's also mobile this time in Rayleigh. Darren, welcome to TalkSport.
Hello, Tommy.
Hi.
I'd just like to say I would agree with animal testing. I've got a son with a genetic condition, and if animal testing would cure or find a cure for my son, then as far as I'm concerned, they could more or less test an animal to extinction. I don't care.
How old is your boy?
He's 9.
He's 9. What's his name?
His name's Jack.
Jack, I'm really sorry to hear that, Darren. Is Jack listening?
No, he's on holiday.
No.
He's away on holiday, enjoying himself, hopefully.
Okay, yeah, that's good. What are Jack's thoughts on it?
He's not 100% aware of everything that goes on. He's not. We answer him honestly whenever we can when we're asked questions about what he's got, but we don't offer too much information for him because he's only 9 years old and we don't want to frighten him. So it does become quite difficult. But
children, though, are often very quite magnificently selfless in their concern for other people and other life forms. What's his thoughts about animal rights?
Well, he loves animals. Absolutely, he loves animals. He's got more than enough pets, shall we say. He does. Yeah, he does. He's a very compassionate lad. Definitely, he likes looking after other people. He's able to go to a normal school and all that sort of thing. He's just he's not in any way. He leads a fairly normal life. The fact is, though, he has got a genetic condition which could end up with his lifespan not being normal. And and I think a lot of the people who are saying that animal experiments are wrong are looking perhaps through rose-coloured spectacles and perhaps haven't got. Perhaps if my son wasn't, didn't have a condition, maybe I would think differently. But
you can't prevent that. Being a parent, first and foremost, is.
Well, if you weigh it up on a set of scales,
all-consuming. Yeah, good luck with that.
No problem.
Talk to you again sometime.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, say hi to Jack.
I will do.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Nice man. Easy being a parent. That's why I think sometimes parents should be allowed an extra vote for every child that they've got, because it's that important and we reflect that in every respect in life. Let's go to Mike, who's called from Taunton with a constructive idea on animal experiments.
Good morning.
Hello, Mike.
Unless animal experiments take place, then medical science will never advance. If people are against animal experimentation, let them put themselves forward.
Well, the barrack room lawyer in me makes me want to take up issue with some of your absolutes here. For example, I think penicillin was discovered without any abuse against animals. So medical research is not totally dependent.
Not totally, but you've got to experiment on something. Even penicillin, they had to use animals to experiment on first, surely, before they used it on humans.
Well, you see, surely is an interesting word in that sentence because it means you don't know, do you? Nor do I.
All drugs are tested on animals before they're tested on humans.
Well, again, you see, you mustn't say that because that might not be true, and then your argument is weakened.
99.9% sure I am true.
Most arguments are weakened, terminally weakened by overstatement, if you don't mind me observing.
I'll take your word for it.
That is a fact. I don't know much else in life, but that is a fact. This idea then that people who are opposed to testing should put themselves forward as guinea pigs for experimentation. Yes. Would the benefits of that work also cascade to those who had not put themselves forward for experimentation?
Of course it would. But the majority of people, if they needed the treatment that animal experimentation has brought about, they wouldn't say no, would they? Otherwise, if they don't, then they're hypocrites, aren't they? I would say, personally.
Yeah, but you wouldn't put yourself forward for experiments.
I wouldn't, because I'm not against animal experimentation.
But you will be happy to accept the benefits of other people putting themselves forward for
Certainly.
experiments. Right.
But I'm not against... There's got to be an alternative. If you don't use animals, there has to be an alternative.
Is this really going to make the world a better place? Such selfishness.
Animal experimentation is bound to make it a better place, yes.
Well, no, you see, it's not, is it, necessarily? Because we've got ourselves quite an issue here, which is quality of life versus length of life.
Yes.
There's more to being, a full human being than simply living as long as you possibly can. I know. I grant you, it's a.
I wouldn't argue with that. I can't agree with that. 100% I agree with it. But if you're talking somebody 5 or 6 years old that needs some operation that can only be brought about by testing it on animals first, then I'm all for testing it on animals first.
Yeah, but you know that emotive argument is easily countered by saying that small fluffy animals do tend to trigger equally passionate emotions in people who if I can finish, if people whose field of vision lies further than their immediate family and their immediate species, and in a sense they've got a higher moral ground there.
I don't think they have at all.
They're concerned about things which are not them or theirs.
It's Walt Disney syndrome. They've seen it on. They think all animals sit in the field singing zippity-doo-dah, zippity-hey.
That argument is beneath this argument. They are concerned about things which are not them and theirs. That altruism, surely, their beckons a better future.
Well, unless you experiment with all medical treatment on something before you use it on humans, I don't know. It's sort of going back to the Gestapo days, isn't it?
Oh, here we go again. Doesn't matter where I end up. Somebody says this is exactly how Nazi Germany started. Mike, you can do better than that. Thank you for your call. 08700 40 50 60. Our poll on the subject has almost got down to 50-50. In fact, it's 56% yes now, 44% no. Any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. If yes, 09009 111 300. Different last three numbers on the no. It's 09009 111 400. Karen Mercer has the travel, and she told us that she was going to spend some time chewing over whether she was a yes or no on this one. I wonder if she's made up her mind.
No, I haven't made up my mind. It's too difficult because on the one hand, I think that you could get, this is really going to be horrible actually, I don't know whether anyone said this before, but prisoners could opt to have experiments on themselves if they wanted to have a shorter sentence or something. No? Have experiments on humans, really?
Well, anybody could volunteer, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you need a motive. In the case of prisoners,
I don't know. It's all a bit nasty, isn't it? I don't think we should have experiments on anything. It's horrible.
No. And let's have no illnesses and diseases too. It's a matter of God, really, isn't it?
No, I don't believe in that either.
How are the roads?
I think our stick to the roads are much better at that.
On 1089 and 10:53 a.m. TalkSport.
It's TalkSport. I'm Tommy Boyd in for Mike Dickin this week, who's on holiday. In a moment, we talk to Derek McGovern to see whether we can get some tips for some decent sports betting in the week to come, and particularly with the curtain going up on the Premiership on Saturday. But ahead, we'll take a couple more calls on animal experiments. Matthew's on the line from Swansea. Matthew, welcome to TalkSport.
Hello, Tommy. My point basically is I'm all for testing of drugs and cures for humans on animals, 100%. But when it comes to dropping shampoo or some perfume into a rabbit's eye, then 100% against that. I think there's enough shampoos, enough perfumes for us all. We could bathe in it for a month of Sundays. But, all for it. If there's a cure for us, then as long as it's, done in the most humane way possible, then, let's do it.
I'm sure I'm talking to somebody whose medicine cabinet, whose bathroom cabinet, I should say, has got lots of plastic bottles in it, but they all say not tested on animals. You can do that, can't you?
Yes, you can, yes. And I think that's... and if you can just take an extra second to look at the labels on the supermarket shelf, then that's great.
Okay, thanks for your call.
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
08700 40 50 60. We'll talk to Derek McGovern next. If you yourself have identified an absolutely nailed-on something or other, preferably something in excess of 5-1, so that we can go each way on it, especially if you get a place 1, 2, 3 or 4. 08700 40 50 60. The vote line is standing at 56% yes, 44% no. You've got another 5 minutes or so if you still haven't managed to make your mark.
On 1089 and 10:53 a.m. TalkSport.
Poll standing at 59% yes, 41% no. This is our poll on animal experiments. Derek McGovern joins us just ahead of getting some tips for coming week and the weekend. Derek, obviously racing is one of your key interests, and animal rights is something that often gets talked about there. What are your thoughts about animal experiments?
Well, I mean, you can sit on the fence about this, but, when it boils down to rabbits, as the gentleman caller was saying earlier on, getting all sorts of chemicals shoved down their throat and down their eyes, I mean, no matter what the benefits to humankind are, you can't really accept it, can you? I mean, there's got to be better ways of finding benefits for mankind than killing off poor little animals.
Okay, moving on then. We've got the Premiership kicking off on Saturday. Who's your tip for the Premiership?
Well, there's only one you can have, Tommy. The people saying it's a 5-horse race, with a big 5 again for this season, but really it's a 2-horse race. Arsenal have had the heart ripped out of the team with Petit and Overmars going. Liverpool aren't good enough. Leeds haven't got a strong enough squad. Man United are odds on, so you can't touch them. The only bet you can have is Chelsea at 6-1. I think that's a fantastic bet. Everybody's each way bets, and I think last year Chelsea at around 9-2. People couldn't see them finishing out the top 3, but they flopped big time, as everyone knows, because of their European Champions League engagements. But they haven't got that this season, and they've got two goal scorers this time around, which they didn't have last time. So 6-1, I think you go an awful long way before you find a better bet than that. Okay, now good football fans, of course, would never bet on any team except their own. So we're looking at each way bets elsewhere. On Newcastle at 66-1, I think with William Hills to finish in the top 3, I know, worth looking at. No, they're not. There's not a prayer for Newcastle to finish in the top 3. I mean, the top 5, if they did that, it would be an achievement. I think if you fancy a team like that, Tommy, like teams from outside the top 5 bracket, you're better off looking at the handicap betting. Many listeners will know that in this, the bookies will award each team a certain start. So, for instance, Man United will start off scratch. And Newcastle will be given an 18-point start above Man United. So you might fancy Newcastle, to beat Man United with this 18-point start, and you can get something like 16-1 in this handicap betting to finish top of the league. Of course, Newcastle could finish above Man United with that kind of start, but then you could be chinned by someone like Ipswich with a 42-point start finishing ahead of Newcastle. So, it's not as easy as it might sound. And one thing I should say, Tommy, in this handicap betting, I know you're a big racing fan, and you'll know that in handicaps on the turf, in anything over 16 runners, you'll get paid to 4th spot, and rightly so. But in the Premiership handicap betting, these tight-fisted bookies won't pay out to 4th spot. There's 20 runners in this, it's a handicap, but you won't get 4th place, you'll only get 3rd, and I think that's disgraceful because they've got everything in the favour anyway, bookies, in betting on football, and this is just one other disgraceful example.
Okay, that's Premiership, thanks for that. Very quickly, I read in one paper yesterday that one of the bookmaking firms, I think it was Bet Direct, made a bit of a mistake when they were offering odds on the Charity Shield. What was that story?
Yeah, they were so lucky here because one of Bet Direct's reckon that if the match went to a draw, there would be 4 eventualities, and Chelsea to win after extra time, United after extra time, Chelsea on pens or United on pens, and they offered prices for each eventuality. Of course, what they didn't realise that there was no extra time. The match would go straight to penalties if it finished in a draw. And so quick-thinking punters backed Chelsea on pens and Man United on pens at 14-1. In effect, they were getting 13-2 for the draw when 2-1 is a normal price. But as in the way of all great potential stings, it never went that far. Something came to the bookies' rescue. So it was nearly a great coup for punters there.
Okay, golf. We've got the 4th of this year's majors starting up. Is it this week or is it?
Yeah, it's on Thursday. Yeah, the USPGA at Valhalla. Everybody, can Tiger Woods be beaten? That's the big question. He's 7-4, 6-4 to win at Valhalla. Remember, he won the USPGA last year, and sometimes you wonder whether it's worth the others turning up. But there is a crumb of comfort. He was playing in a tournament earlier this week in the Buick Open, on Sunday, and he finished way down the field. So perhaps Tiger's not in the kind of form that he was before the Open and the US Open, which where he spread eagle the field. I reckon there's 2 good bets here, Tommy. Okay. I think Phil Mickelson at 20-1 He's in top-class form, got a great record at this track, and in the PGA too. He finished about 5th, I think, in Valhalla when it was last held there 5 years ago. He's 20-1 with one or two firms, Bet Direct being one of them. And Nick Price, he's around 50-1. Fantastic form in the US PGA, and again, he finished in the top 10 at Valhalla a few years ago. And I tell you, these are top-class players at those kind of prices. That's the one good thing about having Tiger Woods in the field. Okay, he's well short, but you're getting decent prices about the other runners.
And what you hear more and more about Tiger Woods is that his game is infallible, and that everything from tee to the cup is as good as anybody, if not better than anybody else. And there was a documentary on Sky last night about his win in the US Open where this point was made again and again. But am I not right in thinking, Derek, he does tend to miss a few 5-footers?
Well, he, certainly a year ago he did. This year he hasn't been missing too many. In fact, he hasn't been missing too many 25-footers as well. I mean, that's the sickening thing. Because
fair enough.
He's actually improved from, he was sensational last year and he's improved again. I mean, you just got to think, though, in a golf tournament, when these are really fantastic players, and Woods has got to be on his top, his A game. If he's slightly off, there's fellas there that can, that can take him, Mickelson and Els. He could win by by a furlong again, Tiger Woods. But you got to be mad to take those kind of odds. I would never back anybody, no matter how good, at 7-4, 13-8 in a golf tournament. I think it's just admitting defeat that. Well, one thing I should point out, Tommy, by the way, is Ernie Els is the second favourite. And if you've listened to me long enough on this show, you'll know that I've got no time for Els at all. I think he's the biggest choker in sport. And he's finished second in the last 3 majors, and he's 8-1 to finish second again in the US PGA. So I might have a couple of bob on that just for old time's sake anyway.
And last one, are serious men like you bothering with the Big Brother book? A lot of people are.
Too right, yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I saw one paper today describing it as the biggest TV gambling phenomenon since Who Shot JR about 20 years ago, and they're dead right. I mean, that was fantastic. Hooked the Nation 20 years ago, but that was just a soap opera. This is real life, and the betting has changed so much. I think all the papers are full of it too. Every paper you pick up, you can't get away from Big Brother. It really is fantastic. Fantastic watching. And from a punter, I think, if you back the winner of a golf tournament or a horse race, okay, you're happy with yourself. You think you class yourself a bit of a shrewdie, but there's always the thing that there's an element of luck there. In this, there is not luck. I mean, this is if you can judge, if you prove a shrewd judge of human nature. I mean, that's so much more satisfying than being a judge of horseflesh, I think, and that's why it's caught on with punters. I mean, it's been a fantastic betting contest.
Yeah, but the cap on the stake must be pretty low because the programme's got a bunch of producers. They know where the bookies are.
Well, yeah, you'd have to think so. I mean, this is something at the beginning. I raised this question at the beginning of the series, but at the moment there's been no evidence whatsoever to see any stage management. I know one or two conspiracy theorists, and normally there's none bigger than me. I reckon that Nasty Nicholas, what a character he is. They reckon he's a plant from Channel 4, and the Hills have offered 20-1 that he will turn out to be a plant, and they've offered 100-1 that the whole series is a complete setup. But I don't know. I think there's been so many contestants backed in this event. Nobody knows anything. It was just like Who Shot JR. You'd have thought the scriptwriters would have known, that it was Kristen long before anybody else did. But no, it turned out to be a fantastic betting heat, and I really do think at the moment this is a bona fide betting contest.
Derek McGovern, thanks for the tips. Happy hunting this weekend Tommy. At the weekend. Good man. Our vote line: any animal experiments are wrong, even if they lead to cures that save human lives. Yes, 61%. Any animal experiments are wrong. Our listeners say yes, 61%, no, 39%. Thank you if you took part. Nicky Horn joins. He's here through till 1. Hi.
Hiya. Yeah, it's after the 12 o'clock news. It's the world of F1 Grand Prix racing. Did you watch the race on Sunday?
I was abroad. And the Spanish don't seem that interested in motor racing.
Well, it was one of the most boring F1 races ever. So I'd like to find out if you watched it. What did you think? Because it was just a procession. We also have exclusive news that Jenson Button's girlfriend could be, and I emphasise the words could be connected to a member of the royal family. Details after the news and sport.
Don't forget to subscribe and like. Comment too if you wish. Even slap your legs and make a purchase from Ann Summers. But don't do nothing.